Hey guys, welcome back. So we're getting this set up and show you what we're doing. So we kind of laid this out the way we thought it went. You can see here, we used welding wire to space this out a little bit. So that wire is about 60 thou diameter. And we had calculated that we basically cut this within about 10 thou of correct, and that we wanted to have 0.53 shorter. So when I measured it, we were showing about 0.6 shorter when I butted that together, and I put the 60 thou spacers, and now we're showing about 540. So, you know, if it all stays like this when I weld it, this will be 0.54 inches shorter than it was. We were targeting 0.53, so that's within 10 thou, plenty good enough. So at this point, we're pretty happy. So because the bottom curved, you can kind of see that they don't match up perfectly, but the top does. You can see we got some like spacers and stuff trying to get everything lined up. Same thing over there, but then we knocked it all loose because I needed a spot to put the ground clamp. But anyway, this one over here is good. There's our foot pedal backing. I shouldn't have set this up on the floor in hindsight, but oops. I didn't think about how to TIG weld it down here. Should have put this on a table. But maybe we'll do that on the next one. So we got this marked. Everything's lined up. It's spaced correctly. It looks good to go. So now we're going to throw probably three or four tack welds on this just to hold it in place. Then we'll come over and do the other one. And then once it's tacked, we're going to fully reassemble it, put it all back on the car, set the car back down, and see if this actually did what we intended. And if it looks good, then we'll pull it apart, fully weld it, and we'll just commit and do that one all at once, and then put it all back on the car and see what happens. Anyway, here we go. Okay, so we just got these tacked. As you can see, we left a tiny gap like we were talking about. That gap is basically 60 thousandths. We did it on both, and we just used the welding wire like we said. So I essentially just kind of stuck a piece in there to keep the spacing while we tacked it. So we tacked it on the floor, and our tacks kind of sucked. Like you can see here, that bottom one was done on the floor, the upper one was done on the table, which really isn't great either. But they're tacked, and we're gonna let it cool for a second, and then we're gonna put all this stuff back together, put it on the car, check our camber, and we'll see if our math was right. So we're supposed to subtract 0.53 inches. We ended up subtracting basically 0.53 and 0.54. So really good, within 10 thou of what we were shooting for. Let's hope we do the second one as well. But yep, here we go. We're gonna put those back together and check our camber. Okay, so we just set the car back down at ride height. And we didn't tighten all the bolts on the suspension on this, or not totally perfect, but it's close. Let's see where we're at. So the car's not level anymore. That's probably because I don't have all the suspension tight. I left the sway bar unhooked. And some of the bolts on that side are just like hand tight. So we're leaning 0.23 degrees with the other side. The side we modified is high. So you can see the angle meter shows that we're kind of tilted like this instead of flat. Instead of flat, we're kicked this way. 0.23. So if we did our camber right, we should see something close to 0.23 over here. Now I know it's close because I can tell the tire looks like it's up and down. Let's see. 0.29. Is it the right way? Same as the car. Okay, so the car's 0.23. We're showing about 0.3. So we're within 1/10 of a degree of having the camber at 0 degrees at ride height. So pretty good. That means our math worked out. We were damn close. Within 1/10. So that's badass. I think. I don't know if changing the ride height will change that. Maybe I should check that too. But even if it doesn't, we went from 3.5 to 0.3. So we still accomplished what we were trying to do. That's really close to being 0. So good stuff. Now I guess we got to take it apart, weld that one out, and then do all that stuff again on the other side. Okay, so we just got done welding, and turned out okay. These ain't my best welds, but they'll do. So one side's prettier, I think the other side. Anyway, they're welded on there. Flip this over. There's the top of that one. This is the second one I did. It turned out a little bit prettier than the first. And then down here, we added some filler just to beef that little spot up. I thought that'd be a high stress area. That's in compression on the very outside of this arm. So anyway, that is one arm down. We just got to put the bushings back in, which actually goes pretty quick now. So we're going to pop those in, put this back together on this side, and then we got to start the whole process over for the driver's side. Okay, so we're doing the second control arm now. You can see we got these already chopped off, and essentially we just labeled these A and B before we cut them so we don't get them mixed up. And we did the cut. We didn't do quite as good a job on this one as we did on the last one. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I forgot them already, but I think we basically cut a little too much. So whenever we put these back together, we'll need to leave a touch more gap than we did on the last ones to get it dead perfect. But anyway, we'll see. Last time we didn't quite get enough camber, so maybe cutting them more will help push us in the right direction. But we got that cut, so we're about to, we got some tape on the floor, and basically I put a bunch of marks to show exactly. So like up here, this is the narrow part. You line up on this edge and that edge, and then this edge. And then back here you can see the 3 edges for each one. And essentially the only dimension we're changing is this one. This one is the one that we need to move a certain distance. So it makes it fairly easy when you lay it on the ground. You basically just center everything up and then push it to the right, how far you want it. And I got some shims to make sure all the alignment looks good up and down. But yeah, once you get that looking good, then we just tack weld it in place. So I got a, as you can see, a very fancy tool for the pedal, and I just tack weld it, make sure it's in the right spot, and then I bring it up here and actually weld it out. So one thing to keep in mind when you're doing stuff like this is these are some pretty highly stressed pieces of metal, because these are the lower control arms. When you accelerate, one of these is going in tension and one of these is going in compression. And you know, it's really not my preference to have to modify these, but since we're welding it, we want to make sure we do as good a job as we can. So you'll note these are super clean. I actually used a Dremel with like a little flapper wheel, and I went through a bunch of them, and I used a grinding rock, and let's see if I can, yeah, like if you look in here, like even down in the corner there, like I got all the paint ground out of there and the rust. Same thing like right here. I mean, it's just even this little edge, these radiuses, everything just totally clean metal. And that way when we weld this, we'd have as minimal amount of contamination, very minimal. I couldn't get it quite perfect, like way up inside of here is really hard to clean, but we did a pretty damn good job, and these will weld fairly good now. And that's what we're shooting for. And we also cleaned them with acetone, and you know, basically wiped some of the dirt out of there and acetoned them. So these are pretty much ready to weld now. But hey, you never know. This may fail down the road, but it's looking good. I think this is going to be okay. Anyway, we'll set it up in the jig next. Alright, so we got this put back in the jig. LOL. Just laying on the floor with tape. But you can kind of see our marks, our edges are lined up nicely. Well, the way the camera light makes it look, throws it in shadow sometimes. But trust me, we're lined up there perfectly. We're lined up here, so you can see the edge of that lines right up with that edge. This edge lines right up with that one. And you can see here, we're moved. And we're going to measure that in a second and see what that number is. And then we'll put a piece of something to space it out so that we get the dimension where we want it. We have a small gap for welding. And that small gap for welding is important for a couple of reasons. It's actually, since I'm TIG welding, it's pretty easy to just weld them like this. You butt them up together and you just kind of fusion weld the two metals. But you really don't want to do that. That's brittle. And the last thing we need is for this to fail. We need the weld to be strong, because we're going to stress these quite a bit. So it's actually important that we don't just have a weld that looks pretty or that's easy to weld, but it needs to be strong. I'd rather have a weld that doesn't look as pretty, because you can do a row of dimes pretty easy like this. Like this TIG welder, I got an Alpha TIG. I can set that sucker up in pulse and go by and do a fusion weld, and it'll look like a row of dimes. It'll be a little under, whatever they call that, undercut or something. But it'll be very pretty. And then you can go back and put a cap on it, but it's not as strong. You'll end up with a brittle fusion like that. So we're not doing that. We care about having a good weld. And also part of it comes down to good fitment. And as you can see, we kind of got the fitment on this. You know, this is excellent. You know, We did our cuts really straight. We got our alignment really good, as you can see, even on both of these. So that's fantastic. And you know, all those details kind of come together to make a good assembly. So looking good here. We're going to get our caliper, check our measurements, get our spacing perfect, gapped out right so that it's where we need them. Then we'll get this tack welded and then fully welded. Alright, so we just hooked our control arms back up. We got it sitting on the ground and we're going to see how it looks. So here's our thing on the car. Pretty close to level, about 0.12. Let's see, this will be the driver's side. So we're shooting for 0. We got our adjusters in the middle right now. What's that, 0.19? Let's see if I can get a better reading. That's a lug nut. Oops. Right, let's try that. 0.13. So just over 1/10 of a degree. This showed 0 a second ago. But, yeah, really close. Yeah, there we go. Closer to 0. So, yeah, pretty much 0 over here. Real close. Let's check the passenger side. See what we got. So 0.17 or so. Again, earlier this one showed 0 too. So it's kind of hard to get this thing ain't dead flat. It's got these little bumps. What's happening is I get in the peaks and valleys. And that's probably a better reading maybe on the edge. Let's try that. It's like 0.12. It's probably a little bit better. Yeah, I guess I probably should have been on this front edge. So anyway, it's about 0.1 roughly on both sides from being vertical. So that's good. It means our math worked out. We ended up pretty much where we want. So now we're sitting at ride height and our camber is basically 0 with the adjusters in the middle. That's what we were shooting for. This will give us adjustment in the future so we can actually move this up and down as required, which is great. Now we're going to put actually I think we're going to take some measurements at this point. Probably need to check the ride height on all 4 corners again, just to probably like roll the car forward and backwards, check the ride height again. And if we're sure that that's right, I think at this point we need to mark basically the tires are 26 inches tall. So say, we know we need at least a 1/2 inch of clearance. So say 26 and a half, or no, 1/2 inch radius would be 27. So basically 27 over 2 is 13 and a half. So from the center of the hub right now, we pretty much need to measure 13 and a half inches, draw a line. You can see there's some green marks here, but those are old from something else. But essentially we need to mark the metal and go ahead and start cutting because it's guaranteed that metal has to go. The only real question is this very front metal. If we cut this out, we're going to lose that edge, which means whatever we put back there, we got to think about how we're going to do that. So, not sure on that yet. But I know the rest of this is getting cut. So anyway, we got to work on that. But hey, this is really good progress. Man, welding those things took a while. It's all the other work. The actual welding process is probably 20%. The other 80% is figuring out what to do and getting everything right. But anyway, good stuff. Finally making some progress. Alright, so we're going to call it a night. We have some mostly good news. We went around and measured. So it turns out when you move the car, like just setting it down and bumping the suspension up and down, that didn't really unload it correctly. So I actually rolled it back and forth some. And now we're showing 0.47, like 1/2 degree negative pretty much on both sides. And the back end's sitting higher than, I swear it's sitting higher than it was, but maybe my memory sucks. But this time I actually wrote it down so I don't forget. So I did that for like all 4 corners. And then here's where we're at. So basically the front's sitting at about 4 3/4, the back's sitting at about 4 3/8. half a degree negative in the back, and you can see the front. These are, you know, positive versus negative, so got some work to do there. But that's kind of the next step. I think we're going to save that for tomorrow. But basically, we need to get our ride height set and get our camber pretty close to where it's supposed to be at ride height. So we're going to work on that. And essentially, we're going to be targeting 4 inches in the back at 0 camber. And I got to figure out what the front's going to be. But it's something to work on because the numbers we're doing, we have to do what's going to work right when we have the big tires on here. So basically, the back is going to be set at 4 inches. But with the bigger tires, the pinch weld will go from 4 inches to 5 inches just by changing to the big tires. So then if the back has got a 5-inch pinch weld, what should the front be? I'm not really sure. I got to think about that because right now the front's at, you know, about 4 3/4. I'd like to lower it. So I don't know. I got to think about that, how we're going to set it up. But that'll be probably for tomorrow. So I guess that's it for now, and y'all take it easy.